Thank you for staying with us. Insecurity continues to be one of Nigeria's biggest challenges. With the consistent rate of violence, kidnappings, corruption, it may be tough for any Nigerian to sleep with their two eyes closed. The National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, has therefore asked the Nigerians to be patient with the Bola Tinubu administration, noting that the crisis inherited from the previous government will not disappear overnight. He further says that the country needs cooperation of all stakeholders to ensure the federal government eliminates all forms of insecurity in the country. But Nigerians are hoping that this phase of insecurity in the country comes to an end soon. Well, joining us in the studio is a security consultant, Darlington Umoru. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Morning, Veronica. Morning.
Welcome.
My pleasure, always been here.
All right. It's good to have you. Now, I'm sure you heard the statement of the NSA. And then this morning, if you look at the paper, looking at the front page of the Voice of Liberty, a statement by a report from a Beacon Consulting, that's a Nigeria security report, said that over 10,000 persons have been killed, abducted in 10 months. And a breakdown of that report says 7,472 persons were killed, 3,161 abductions between January and October were recorded this year. And then you have again the NSA report. How do you address this matter?
Well, one basic thing he said was to corroborate what I have often said, that security is the business of every person. He talked about cooperation, not just amongst the security agencies now, but even those of us who are bloody civilians. He also appealed for not just calm, but for the people to be a bit patient. We don't need to go into history to look at how Nigeria was plunged into this magnitude of insecurity we're suffering today. It didn't start today. It didn't start with this administration. The administration merely inherited the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Unfortunately.
Well, it's not really unfortunate. It is a norm in every part of the world. You inherit the good, you inherit the bad, and you also inherit the ugly. Government is a continuum. You continue from the last administration, your predecessors, where they stopped. That's where you begin from. And then how much you are able to bring on board to correcting some of the, whether good, bad, or ugly you inherited, how much are you going to improve on that is what matters. But to say insecurity is limited to one country, whether in Africa or to any other continent, no. It's a global matter today. Across the world, even as we speak now, there are various degrees of insecurity. We're experiencing wars across the world right now. We're experiencing war somewhere close to the east. We're also experiencing war in the eastern part of Europe now, talking about Ukraine and Russia, that has started a long time ago against the prediction of experts, who had believed that Ukraine was going to be subdued in a matter of days. But that's not the topic for today.
Absolutely.
Talking about the insecurity, the report, the annual report by Beacon for 2023, gave a breakdown between January and October. Now, this current administration assumed office not in January, but in May, on May 29th, which apparently meant that May had ended, and then you want to look at what started in June. Now, if you permit me, let's look at the flow, the sequence at which insecurity has grown. If we have to take, for instance, the report of this Beacon Consulting, based in Abuja. Here he said in January, 749 persons were killed. Now, January was pre-election. January was pre-election, and so 749 persons were killed across the nation by this report, which meant that all the squabbles, including the activities of politicians, including the activities of kidnappers, including the activities of terrorists, Boko Haram, ISWAP, and the rest of them, put together, 749 persons were recorded to have been killed. Now, move it down to February, the month of election, the first phase of election, it dropped to 624 persons. Now, take it from February to March, it rose. Now, the results of election, agree and no agree and all of that, and things, you know, election was another month, March was another month for election. Okay, the number of persons who were killed rose to 961 in March. Now, when it got to after the election in April, it dropped to 707. In May, it rose again from 679 to 854. Don't ask me why. There were lots of uncertainty in the country. These are the newly elected president, the president-elect then, and others. Many had said and raised fears whether they will come, they were allowed to assume office or not. There were predictions here and there. There were threats here and there that this administration will not come to pass. One of the, permit me not to mention a name, but maybe by the description you have an idea of what I want to say there. One of the vice presidential candidate of one of the political parties that contested election was even in the media threatening fire and brainstorm and fire to say that this election, this administration will not be sworn in May. Now, May, this administration was inaugurated. May recorded 854 persons killed by Beacon Consulting's report. June, when this government had assumed office, the number of persons recorded here dropped dramatically and drastically from 854 to 552. Wow. In the first month of this administration being in power. Yeah. What does that explain?
Right.
It meant that the administration came into power, went straight to work, and we saw all of that when even the outgone chiefs, the chief of army staff, the chief of defense staff, the chief of naval staff visited Mr. President. He gave that marching order. And he also told them what they must do to encourage the men at the theater. Yeah. Now, what result did we get in June? From 854 that he inherited, the number of persons killed dropped to 552.
And in July?
In July.
No, that was
June.
That
is
June.
Was June. July, it rose a bit, again to 638 from 552. Instability.
Was still within the 500 range.
Yes. Now, in August, it dropped to 581. Now, between September and October,
there's been an increase.
It dropped further. Because these 2 months recorded 1,127. If you divide that by two, okay, it's just a little fraction on top of 500, which meant that it dropped.
Okay. Let me interrupt you at this point, Mr. Omoro. So, when you look at the trends that we saw this year, the year of election, the year
and for those who were killed, it's in two phases. Okay. You have those who were killed and you have those who were kidnapped. Okay. So I was going to come to the kidnap.
Okay. I just wanted you to weigh, the figures that we are seeing this year with, past election years that also, of course, had inaugurations. Where would, because Mr. Malam Rubadu has said, speaking for the administration, that, and from what we've seen, that the situation somewhat improved. But when you weigh what happened at the last election year to now, is this like a normal, however unpalatable as it may seem?
I don't want to choose any of those two words. I don't want to take any of those two words, but I have a reason for looking at these figures as given by, not me, Beacons Consulting.
Yeah.
And then if you want to juxtapose this on what we have had, taking your question now to heart, there's a lot of improvement between June and October. There's a huge drop in the level of, if you want to take this, if these facts are anything to go by, it's just that because of time, we might not be able to begin to revisit all what had happened in all other years before now. Because we're looking, the reports in the papers is talking about 10 months. Now, if you sum up what happened between January and 1st of June, and sum up what happened between 1st of June and October, the figures at the one between January and
June
is higher.
But do you agree to an extent with the report between June and October? Do you agree that, the situation improved?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You see, I didn't just want to begin to talk without facts and figures not given by me. Because after here, some will say, this is where you belong. Or you belong there, you're supporting this. I am not interested in that. I'm using facts and figures presented by an independent body. I'm not a spokesperson for this government. But as somebody in this industry, this field, if you look at it, even from the layman's point of view, once upon a time, a couple of years back, I will come here almost at the point of tears, where I am invited to speak on any of the television stations, but the figures I'll be coming with would have been obstructed by the time I'm getting to the studio because more people would have been killed or kidnapped. And so I said it here once upon a time that when the former chiefs visited Mr. President, talking about the incumbent president, he gave them a marching
orders.
And those marching orders, I said, this is a president who was not imported from another country to Nigeria. This is a president who was prepared for this office. Here is a president who has a vice, who was in the depth of insecurity, who came from the depth of insecurity. And so apparently, they ought to have, when it comes to security matters now, they ought to have been prepared, knowing what they were going to face. Because with insecurity, the economy cannot grow. The economy has largely been killed in the northern parts of Nigeria and in the southeastern part of Nigeria. As a result of insecurity, farmers in the northern part of Nigeria can hardly go to farm today, where most of our food crops come from. The food basket of this nation is in the north. Plateau State, Borno State, Benue State, all of them put together, these are the food basket. But today, what do you have? In some parts of the north, you have to pay the terrorists to be able to go to farm. They also watch them to ensure that information about their movement are not given out to security agents. We had situations in the past where farmers were slaughtered in the farm. Even those close to the Lake Chad basin. We even had some on the dry land that were slaughtered, purportedly saying that they were slaughtered because they had given out information about them that gave them away to the security agents and the military, who were working tirelessly to ensuring that there's peace in this nation. With that statement, that position was not correct. Because the advancement on checking insecurity in Nigeria has grown and is still growing.
And one aspect that he mentioned, which is critical to the growth of addressing matters of insecurity, is this cooperation that he's speaking about from Nigerians. talking about information, sharing information and intelligence as much as Nigerians have them with security operatives. But how well has that worked over the years when we look at the trust deficit that Nigerians have for these persons?
Sometimes you talk like a security consultant.
Well, as it is.
Yes, what you have said, that incorporation has not really worked, has not really helped us. That was why sometimes I did suggest and advised that the PRO unit of the military, the PRO units of the security agencies should work towards giving confidence back to the people such that they can work with them. Because we've had situations where information were given to security agencies and those information leaked back to the enemies. And so at the end of the day, for instance, up until this moment, I've not been able to fathom how those men, the farmers who were slaughtered at a point in time by the terrorists, got the information that it was farmers who had given away information about them that led the military to go to the areas, their routes, to ambush them. How did they get that? And don't also forget that I like the use of facts. Once upon a time, one of the former presidents of this country did talk about the infiltration of his government by the terrorists, which meant that there are people, deliberately put in these places to look at what is happening in those places and then give back a report. I also give you another instance. In the case of Niger State, where school children were taken, and the man who took those school children, when he was visited, when negotiation was on, when he was visited by one of the clerics in the north to talk about the release of those children, he did say in Hausa to the cleric that he's aware about the number of troops that had been brought into Niger State from Abuja, that they're wasting their time. That is aware that if anything, and is aware about their movement. So how did such information get to somebody who was with the children in the forest? And he made a statement. He said, the man who gave him the job is with you. So which meant it was like a business thing. Somebody contracted him. Apparently, if his words were anything to go by, if you had to read and study his statements.
How do we address this matter of fifth columnists who still, stop at the way of government's effort to addressing this matter of security, especially from this perspective of cooperation, trust, and information sharing?
It's a difficult one. You cannot completely be able to eradicate it, but it can only be brought to a sizable state or position, minimal position. But if you think you can, because there are bad eggs everywhere. In every organization, there are bad eggs. In every institution, there are bad eggs.
Even with the right work conditions?
There are bad eggs. Because some people would deliberately want to plant some persons there to do certain jobs for them, particularly the influencers. Don't take that away. If you do, then you are missing the point completely. You are missing the point completely. But what you need to do is to ensuring that it is brought down to a controllable state. Now, let's not begin to look at all of this. Now, if you look at this, in about 2 years ago, we've talked about this severally in this studio. About 2 years ago, somebody was coming from North Africa on a New Year, on a January, to hit Abuja. He was not a Nigerian, but the alertness of the DSS reported the movement of that man. And at that point, it was handed over to another security agency who were to do their own beat. Isn't that true?
Yes.
But it was blown. Rather than do what is called lead, follow him up, arrest him, the thing was blown to the media. And by the time he got to the media, the man had heard, and then he disembarked. Isn't it? So why should it have been so? Some of these things ordinarily are not expected to go to the media until they are completely executed. They are security matters. That's why sometimes I come here and tell you it's not everything I will want to say. There are things you are allowed to work out. Then at the end of the day, when this culprit would have been apprehended, then you can now begin to speak about what happened, the workings. But when you begin to report the workings of security agencies, even before the break of an incident, then there's a problem. The men who put Abba Kyari into trouble today were followed from outside Nigeria to Africa until they got to a part of Nigeria, Enugu, where they were arrested. It was not blown. If it was given to the media, those guys would have disembarked, particularly when they got to a part of Africa. Before they embarked on that aircraft, because they didn't, it was not a straight flight. I think it was to Ethiopia and then to Enugu. But then they were followed and were arrested. Those guys were coming with drugs. So, you see, that has to do with human nature that has been in existence. But to completely eradicate or expunge it is as good as you thinking or saying today that you would be able to completely eradicate terrorism in the world. Terrorism has come to stay. But what you try to do so much so is to minimize or reduce the extent your country suffers by the use of technology.
In the Nigerian setting, looking at our realities, looking at the indices, would you also say that insecurity has come to stay in Nigeria, especially in election years? And you've said it all. It's not good. The elections have come and gone. Dust may have settled, but for grieving families, victims of varying dimensions of insecurity, tell us how best we can tackle these things, because analysts have said that there is a link between insecurity, between violence and elections.
You're not far from the truth, but again, taking the first question the way you said it, whether insecurity has come to stay in Nigeria, for you to expunge insecurity in Nigeria now, I'm not sure you'll be alive when that will happen, if it will happen. There are certain factors that have come to stay in this country that have not been able to be eradicated. The worst thing you can do to a man, a criminally minded man, is to arm him. The moment you give a weapon to a man, that weapon can also be used against you. Retrieving that weapon is not as easy as handing it over to him. The world is suffering from proliferation of small arms and light weapons today. The wars going on in the world, various parts of the world, is also fueling the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. And so crimes committed without firearms is limited. It's limited. I've said here, times without number, that there are just two reasons why a firearm is manufactured. Just two reasons: to kill or maim. No other reason why the manufacturer wants to manufacture a firearm. And you that the firearm is pointed at, know the reasons why that firearm is being pointed at you. And so you must submit, except if you have a superior firepower. And so, if elections, now leave the terrorists and the bandits out of it now. The only way you can face security agencies at the polling units, or even scare the people who are not even armed, is to bear arms. And so some of these politicians are very much aware of them. Look at the last election. Somebody was arrested and was naked. He had firearms. Who gave it to him? He said he was a thug to one of the politicians. Not just a politician. And so why do we need all of that? So would you stop election now? Terrorists that have been fueled, that have been sponsored by different people and from different segments, can you stop them? So looking at stopping terrorism in the world, I said that one earlier on, it's as good as not being possible. The best you can do is what Nigeria is working on and achieving at the moment, where today the fight between terrorists and the Nigerian government is not different from the fight between terrorists themselves, amongst terrorists themselves. There's this battle of rivalry between ISWAP and Boko Haram that has helped the Nigerian government so much.
Yeah.
That has helped to conquer the leadership of both terrorist bodies. because one want to conquer one and then take over the Sambisa forest. But that is what has also led to the surrendering of so many of Boko Haram members. But again, this administration, without fear or favor, I can beat my chest to say, going by these figures we are seeing, not even using what we are hearing or the feelers we're getting, these are figures by independent organizations, being released. At the end of the day, you sum them up. Then you look at the trend. Are they growing or there is a fall? Is there improvement today or what have you? That is why specifically I came with these figures, just like you guys have them here, to talk about them. And then I said, let us look at whether they are geometrically rising or arithmetically falling.
Right. I want you to quickly touch on something because we are inching close to
That's why I'm
time.
here.
And that is the fact that the federal government is saying it's not going to name, shame terrorism financiers. And that is one thing that Nigerians have been looking forward to, the list of names. We've always had the government say, we know those who are, sponsoring these persons, and Nigerians have been saying, okay, publish their names. But the government is coming out to say now, we are not going to name or shame them. What do you say to this?
Well, I do not agree with that. I do not subscribe to not naming and shaming them.
Okay.
That means if you're not doing that, then if you're not doing that, it means you're shielding them. And if you're shielding them, it means that somehow they are encouraged. What happens in other climes? Let's take an instance of what happened in UAE, between UAE and Nigeria. Some sponsors were arrested, and then the transporters, the courier, were also arrested over there. The recipients here were never arrested. Those ones are serving jail terms, 21 years, 10 years. Those who were arrested in UAE, they were named, not only shamed, but jailed to pass on a message that they're not ready to condone anything that has to do with terrorism. I think we should follow that line. This administration should toe that line. Whoever is involved, criminal activity is a criminal activity. If you had repented, it's a different thing. But if you're doing it and they know you, why should they not be arrested? If I go to the bus stop now and the mama who is selling akara, I pick some akara balls, the bean cake, and run away, I'll be beaten mercilessly and be shamed. And so why should sponsors of terrorism be shielded? No. No. Every government that means well for its people must shame and jail, sentence them to jail, so that they will serve as deterrent to others.
But that would be like you said earlier on, that after you must have concluded your investigations that this person...
It is the courts. It's not you. Your own is to take them to court.
You have done your investigation.
Absolutely.
Your own is to take them to court. It's a process. I don't need to go from A to Z. It is divided. The police has their responsibility. The DSS has their responsibility. They hand over. Synergy. You hand over to the next person. Just like I used the case of the man who was coming from North Africa. Yeah. Who had about 3 passports on him, who had a vehicle he was coming with, and where he was to pick who and who. These were jobs done by the DSS and handed over to the next set of people who blew it open. Now, in the case of people suspected terrorist sponsors, you do your investigation and make arrests and prosecute them. At the point of prosecution, you are handing them over to the judiciary that will not do its own job.
Previous administrations had gone to court with this.
They never went to court with any one of them. It's these same stories we've been hearing. They never did, my dear sister. They never did, and we are inheriting that. They never did. The best we had, even from authorities, were that we know them.
We know them, yes.
Unmask them. If you knew them, unmask them. The current governor of Zamfara State said something about the outgone governor being a part of sponsors of, although he has not been able to prove that in the law court, that the man was one of the sponsors of the bandits. Of course, you can always use one instance where one of the bandits were turbaned and was not arrested in Zamfara State.
Right.
In that former administration. It's there. That one can be defended. But he has not, he made a lot of allegations. Even one of his commissioners or SS made lots of accusations against this man who is a minister now. But what was done? Nothing. This thing is it's becoming hereditary, where governments will come and say, we know them, but we will not. Why are you telling us you know them?
That's the question. And that's a fine place to leave this conversation.
So you should tell us why you know them, and you cannot prosecute them.
It's important.
That's a challenge. That's a challenge.
We'll have to leave this conversation here now. So much has been said. Darlington Umoru, security consultant, we must thank you for your time on the program.
Any day, any time. My pleasure being here. And I enjoyed myself.
Oh, so did we.